All right, everyone, welcome. This is, I think we should get started now with the third session of the second day of the ArchivesSpace online forum. And a huge thank you to Jessica and Christine and anyone else actually who's still up and awake in North America. For the rest of you, good morning or good afternoon or wherever else you might be. It's my pleasure to introduce the three speakers for this session, which is the Show Us Your Implementation session. The way we'll structure it is we'll have three quick presentations followed by a Q&A section towards the end. So I'll start right off. The first speaker who will be leading this session is Natalie Adams. A quick note, Natalie Adams is the Systems Archivist at the Cambridge University Library. She's been seconded to the role from the Churchill Archive Centre in Cambridge. Her past projects have included the online catalogue of the papers of Winston Churchill and collaborating with local archivists to set up Janus, an online portal for catalogues of archives held in Cambridge. And her talk today is going to be looking at ArchivesSpace in Cambridge, a consortial approach. Next up after Natalie will be Aline Brodin, and I hope I pronounced the name correctly. Aline has been working at the University of Edinburgh for more than 4 years, first as a project archivist, working on 2 cataloging projects for the Lothian Health Services Archive, and now as a cataloging archivist. As the lead cataloging archivist of the Center for Research Collections, she is key to the development, implementation, and use of ArchivesSpace at the University of Edinburgh. And she'll be talking about the implementation of ArchivesSpace at her university. And after Ali, we'll have Matthew Neely from the Bodleian Library in Oxford. Matthew is a senior archivist at the Bodleian Libraries at the University of Oxford, where he has responsibility for the digital curation and the metadata in the archives and modern manuscripts section. He's worked at the Bodleian since 2002, first as an archives assistant and then a project archivist. And he has been in this current role since December 2015. So thank you so much to all the three speakers, and we'll get started right away with Natalie. Over to you, Natalie.
Right, well, thank you very much, Venkat, and thank you very much for inviting me to talk today. So I'm going to be talking to you about implementing ArchivesSpace in Cambridge. I know it's quite early in the morning for us in the UK, but very late for some of you. So I've chosen some gorgeous illustrations from the Cambridge Digital Library and of the University Library, which I hope will help you stay with me through my talk. I'm going to start by giving you some background to our project and talk through some of our implementation challenges, especially around migration, and finally end with a taste of what we're working on next. To start with, ArchivesSpace is being implemented by Cambridge University Library as part of a project which is going to be running until April 2021. The defining characteristic of our installation is that it covers much more than the University Library's collection, and it includes a local consortium of archives based across the city. 29 different repositories have signed up to be part of the Cambridge Archive Management System. Some of them are part of the university, like departments, museums, and libraries, and some, like the archives that are based in the colleges of the university, are run as completely separate organisations. We're really pleased with the take-up that we've had and the vote of confidence in what we're doing. It's almost a clean sweep of archives in Cambridge. The University Library is leading the project, and it is by far the largest contributor of data to the new system. The other repositories range widely in size. Some are quite large organisations like Churchill Archive Centre, which has a staff of 12, but many of the smaller college archives are only staffed by one person working on a part-time basis. The scope of our project also includes migration of legacy data, both from the library itself, so that's 8 datasets, plus a further 19 from the partner organisations. So at times, to be honest with you, that seemed like quite a daunting prospect, but we're keeping our eyes on the prize and thinking about the benefits that our projects will deliver. Part of the project is to replace the current online catalogue of archives in Cambridge. That is Janus, which has been going for 18 years, so it's due for a replacement now. And the wider coverage of our new discovery system and the inclusion of digital object records will yield significant benefits to the research community, by providing a one-stop shop where they can discover the cultural riches held in our city and plan research visits to a number of different repositories which are geographically close to one another. And for the home team in the University Library, I think the benefits of implementing ArchivesSpace will be shared by many of you. It's part of the library's overall digital transformation programme. It's going to support organisational and technical resilience plus integration with other systems. And the collection management functions will give us opportunities to gain a comprehensive overview of our holdings and prioritise our work much more effectively. So what have our implementation challenges been? The first one was how to structure our repositories on ArchivesSpace. There are 6 specialist departments in the University Library which all hold archive and manuscript collections and will all be using ArchivesSpace. In the past, separate systems have been used to create catalogues, and this has made it hard for users to gain a clear overview of what resources are available to them in this very large building you can see on my slide, which is the University Library. So we wanted an approach which would serve our users better and would support the comprehensive overview we need of the collections. But at times, we still need to be able to report separately about the individual departments. So we recognised that for some purposes we needed to be together, but for others we needed to be separate. We decided to combine the 6 university library departments into one repository on ArchivesSpace, much easier to capture an overview of collection management that way and much simpler for our users. For the separate bit, we decided to rely on our reference codes, specifically the prefixes to them. In the UK, many archives incorporate ARCON repository codes as part of their identifiers. These codes can be obtained from the UK National Archives, and the library already used 6 different ARCON codes in its referencing scheme. So keeping the ARCON codes as part of the references and adding them to any other identifiers like those we use for accessions and so on will allow us to produce reports from ArchivesSpace which we can slice and dice as we need to, sometimes representing all the archives in the library and sometimes focusing on the activity and collections of a particular department. Next, we have some challenges around our consortial structure. So firstly, data protection. We would really like to use agent records in ArchivesSpace to their full potential by including contact information as part of the agent record. But contact information is categorised as personal data under the terms of the GDPR and the Data Protection Act, and there are strict regulations about how personal data can be shared. Agent records in ArchivesSpace are shared between all the repositories on the ArchivesSpace instance, and not all of our repositories are part of the university. So for that reason, we've decided not to use the system for contact information. Location records. So we are at the early stages of thinking about how we're going to implement location management for the library. But we've noticed that location records, even though you can specify which repository they relate to, can be browsed from any repository and they appear in the pick lists as you're allocating references to containers. So that could be a problem for us further on. We've made some local tweaks to our ArchivesSpace. So we've loaded the UK archival thesaurus into ArchivesSpace. This is a controlled vocabulary of over 14,000 records. It's going to help us with the consistency of migrating our data, plus future cataloguing work and discovery. We've also added reference codes and identifiers pretty much everywhere on the staff user interface. We found a plugin which we could use to add them to the tree view, and we've also added them to the results table. And finally, we've updated the YAML file with references to ISAD-G because that's more familiar to us than DAX, and we've put some familiar examples in there to support our ArchivesSpace users. But by far our biggest challenge is migration. So I've chosen this lovely interior shot of the library, which has light in the distance, because to be honest, that's how I'm feeling about migration right now. We have got a lot of migration to do. We're focusing on 2 different data sets. Atom, the access to memory system, and then a system called Cantab, which was actually based on Microsoft Access and has been used by many archives in Cambridge. So we started off by mapping our data, crosswalking the data elements in the legacy systems to ArchivesSpace. And to be honest, we wasted some time here on user-defined fields before learning that these were only available in resource level records. None of our legacy systems work like that. The same fields and functions are available at all different levels. So it wasn't something we expected in ArchivesSpace. We got a lot of help from the ArchivesSpace community using the listserv and the listserv archives, and we had some really useful advice from Harvard. And one of our approaches has been using customized labels for our note fields. So I think that's enabled us to do a really good match from our legacy data to ArchivesSpace. And we've developed a migration tool. So in the interest of time, I'm not going to read through the 4 steps that it carries out because I know you can see them on my slide. This is something that we are hoping that we'll be able to share more widely with the ArchivesSpace community in due course. But as probably most of you who've migrated data into ArchivesSpace will recognise, by far our biggest challenge has been around unstructured information in the legacy systems needing to go into structured fields in ArchivesSpace. So as an archivist, it's at step 3, making agreed changes to the data and normalization, where the magic happens. And on my next slide, I'm just going to talk through an example of what we've been doing with extent information, but we've been making similar improvements to name or agent record information in our legacy data, and also information about archival levels. So here we are. On the left-hand side, you can see that this is the kind of wordy, unstructured text statement that we have in our legacy systems describing extent, a long way away from what ArchivesSpace would want. So the migration tool analyzes the content of the extent fields and basically does a really good job of posting those statements into separate part extent records on ArchivesSpace, while, as you can see, keeping the original extent statement in the container summary. We're pretty sure in this example that the bit in square brackets is probably a note from the archivist to themselves to go back and check this out later on. So we want to be absolutely determined not to drop any information as part of the migration. So what's next for us? Well, this is the Commonwealth clock on my slide here. To be honest, for me, it feels like the clock is ticking very, very loudly and we've got an awful lot to do. We're currently working absolutely full throttle on migration work, carrying out test migrations of the legacy data and reporting problems to the archivists. So there might be errors or hard stop problems where they've got to fix the data before the migration tool can put it into ArchivesSpace, or there are warnings. So these are messages which are basically, you might like to review how this data is going to migrate into ArchivesSpace, because maybe there's some changes you want to make in the current system before the final migration. Our first migrations actually went live earlier this month. So 5 of the legacy datasets from the University Library went live on our production ArchivesSpace, finishing last week. So that was a really brilliant milestone to celebrate. And obviously at the moment, we're all working from home in the lockdown. So there are some new challenges for us. Across our consortium, quite a few of our partners have been furloughed, so they're not available to progress the migrations right now. But for those who are working, there are quite a lot of positives about the timing right now. We have a live production ArchivesSpace system up and running, and lots of people are using it to retrospectively convert old typewritten catalogues and things. So we've probably got quite a boost to the content of the system because of the lockdown, and quite a lot of people working from home probably have more time to do data and migration checking than they would have if they were in their normal workplaces. There's a lot still to do, so the public user interface, I'm going to be really interested in what Matthew's going to tell us about the Bodleian's work on this. We've got lots of integrations to do, so with the Primo system in the library, plus external data aggregators across the UK, and collection management. When we get into the library, we need to really get our teeth into this, especially around location management. So here's how you can contact me and find out more about our project if you would like to. And I'd like to finish by thanking you very much for inviting me here today, and to thank Jessica and the team at Lyrasis for all the help and advice and support we've received, as well as what we've received from the wider ArchivesSpace community. It's been brilliant. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Natalie. That was fantastic. Great. Next up, we have Aline from the University of Edinburgh. You can go ahead, Aline.
All right. Is it working? Can everyone hear me? Yeah.
Yes.
Great, perfect. So hello everyone. I'm going to be talking about the implementation of ArchivesSpace at the University of Edinburgh. So ArchivesSpace was launched in June 2015 at the university after an implementation project which involved archivists, software developers, project and innovation staff, and IT support staff. So we were the first European institution to adopt it and to become a member. And we started with a version 1.5, and we now have the version 2.6. So why did we choose ArchivesSpace? So there were many reasons, and we don't have the time to list them all, but I'm just going to mention a few important ones. So we had been looking for a way to gather all archivist functionality in one place for a while, so all the collection management aspect and the resource discovery aspect. And we had already extensively tried Archivist Toolkit, which is ArchivesSpace, one of ArchivesSpace predecessors. And it was almost ideal. It was ticking almost everything on our wish list, but it had no front end. So ArchivesSpace, as you know, it's got a public site and it could solve this issue. And moreover, to have all of our finding aids and collection management information in one place is particularly useful for user services staff. So they have access to the admin area where they can have an overview of all of our collections and accessions, even if it's not published. Another advantage was that ArchivesSpace is an open source software, which gave us opportunities to develop and customize it. And it's also web delivered, which means that the collection catalogs could become available in real time, and we could publish them ourselves. We had control over that. So I find it also particularly useful when working with students, interns, and volunteers. So we usually have them work directly in ArchivesSpace. It's a good experience for them, and it's quite handy for us. So the fact that it's web delivered means they just need a laptop and an internet connection to be able to work. They can work in the library, in a reading room, or at home. And similarly, we can check their work anywhere and work remotely ourselves, which is quite important nowadays. And finally, the fact that we were a member meant that we had access to an established support network, and we received excellent software support via mailing lists, phone, and email. So what did we have before? I'm just gonna give a brief overview. So it was a little bit all over the place, so in different formats, in different locations, which is one of the main reasons we got ArchivesSpace, as I was saying. So for all the collection management aspects of our accessions, locations, authorities, and some collections details, we had a collection management system built by our deputy university archivist, Grant Betters. So it was very useful. We still use it for some location and for keeping track of references, but it wasn't sustainable on the long term, and it depended on one person, so it was a bit risky. To deliver our finding aids, we had several catalogs online thanks to various cataloging and preservation projects. So this project applied ISRG standards, and then data was encoded as EAD XML. So, and we were also delivering top-level archival description through Archives Hub. And finally, we also had a wide range of spreadsheets, databases, Word document, PDF, printing catalogs, and indexes. So all these older resources, some of them are still in use today, and they're brilliant, but they're not very modern, let's say. So we are slowly converting them into ArchivesSpace resources through various projects involving interns, students, and volunteers. So we want to turn information into ArchivesSpace manually and improve this information. And if the format is straightforward enough, then myself and my coworker can retro-convert it ourselves using Excel and the XML editor Oxygen. And then we import it next to the EAD importer. So it takes me to the data migration. So how did we get all this into our new system? So we chose to start with our public-facing resources by migrating existing EAD XML files and also retro-converting our old spreadsheets and databases. So this was done by one person, the Deputy University Archivist, so it was quite a big job. The authorities migration was a bit more complex, and so it was done separately by Claire Knowles, so our Library Digital Development Manager, and I'm going to talk about it a little bit more later. So this first phase, so the delivery of nearly 17,000 catalog records, so including components, along with 22,000 authority terms. So it wasn't all of our finding aids, but it was a good chunk. It was a good start, I would say. So after this, we started importing the behind-the-scenes data. So that is to say all the accessions data for archives and rare books, because the rare books also use ArchivesSpace for their accessions. So it was imported as CSV files, and at the start of 2016, we started using ArchivesSpace properly for accessioning. So one of the hurdles we faced was mainly during data migration, and especially during the migration of authorities. So for a while, the authorities were not linking up with the resources migrating into ArchivesSpace by the archives team. So as you know, in ArchivesSpace, you've got your resources, and then you've got your agent record, and you can link them up together at resource level or archival object level. So when we were importing our EAD files, the agent would get created, but they were not linked to the resources. So it's fine when you've got only one resource and you can do it manually, but obviously when you've got thousands of them, you need to find a way to make it automatic. And the other problem with the authorities is that it would not map to the ArchivesSpace table structure. So when you've got your agent record on ArchivesSpace, you've got obviously different fields. So the title, the date, the qualifier, etc. And the problem was, so the wrong information would end up in the wrong field. So you had dates in the title field and names in the qualifier. So that was a problem. So the solution, Claire Knowles had to make a modification to the EAD importer in the plugins. So the changes are available to view on our GitHub code repository. And Claire also written a great blog about it if you want to know more about the technical details, because I wouldn't know all the details. So I'm going to share the links a bit later if you're interested. Another problem was the fact that the EAD importer is quite strict, we found, and vary depending on the version of ArchivesSpace. So our archivist had to run our EAD files through style sheets in our XML editor to get the flavor of EAD ArchivesSpace will accept. So it took some time. It was a bit of a process of trial and error, and he had to import bigger files in chunk, and some files were even recreated manually because there were too many bugs. So with Insight, there may have been better ways to do it. It was a bit of a balancing act between getting the bulk of our resources imported in the new system and it being perfect. But we knew from experience as well that for users, having access to an imperfect finding aid is better than no access at all. So I'm now going to talk a little bit about an aspect of ArchivesSpace we've been exploring a little bit. So our use of digital objects and the work we've been doing to integrate IIIF into ArchivesSpace. So we've been using digital object for a while to add a visual element to our catalog to make it a bit more user-friendly and attractive. So I'm going to show you directly on our catalog. I'm going to get out of this. Right. So as you can see, this is live. This is what our digital object look for now. So as you can see, they've got a thumbnail embedded in the description, and you can click on this thumbnail, and it's gonna take you to Luna. So Luna is our online image platform. So as you know, ArchivesSpace doesn't have any storage, so you cannot upload anything directly. So we use URLs from Luna, one URL for the thumbnail, and it's just an image, and you can control the size, and then the URL to actually take you to Luna. So this one has got a book viewer, but that's quite a luxury. They don't all have a book viewer like this. So most of the time, it's just a few high quality images. So it looks pretty well, it looks pretty good, but what we are trying to do is to integrate IIIF into ArchivesSpace. So it's very much in the prototype stage. So what I'm going to show you is still in our test websites. It's not accessible outside of the university network, but just to give you an idea. A quick word maybe on IIIF before I go further. So just very, very briefly, it's a set of APIs developed to standardize and improve the way digital images are presented and described across institutions. So as of now, for us, the Luna can generate IIIF. You can see here, and it can be seen in a IIIF viewer that looks like this. So that's your IIIF manifest. It does require the metadata to be excellent on Luna. So one essential piece of metadata we found is to have something that will consistently unit the images you want to put together for your IIIF manifest, so to put all the image relating to one object together in the correct order. So for us, it was the digital object ID and a sequence number. So you could use a shelf mark, but for us, it wasn't suitable because of legacy issues. So we found that digital object ID was the best way to proceed. So what would that look like in ArchivesSpace? So this is another test. That's our test version of ArchivesSpace where we try something out, and it's pretty handy. So it looks the same when you're in your archival object. You've got the thumbnail, same principle, and then if you click on it, you end up here. So as you can see, so that's a IIIF manifest, and it looks like ArchivesSpace, but it's actually not ArchivesSpace. So you can see the URL is different. It's the same as this one. So that's actually our digital developer who created a bolt-on to make the interface look like ArchivesSpace, just to improve user experience. So they're not taken on a completely different platform with a completely different navigation. So we found it was a bit easier this way. It looks a bit better. And there is a link here to take you back to the catalog entry, and all these links actually work. So it takes you to the actual ArchivesSpace, but you also have your manifest. So the next step would be to actually embed the manifest into the ArchivesSpace entry. So here, instead of a thumbnail, we know that it works because they managed to do it, but the problem is that it did not look very good. So it's just something to be improved on. So the manifest basically is just too big for the page, and it looks very clunky. So and also they need to find a way to do it which is sustainable, so which is not too much do it yourself. So it's just something they are working on. They are working hard to solve it. So we know that it works. It's just that we need to fix our metadata, because one of the most important things is to make sure the metadata in Luna is ready, and it's not always the case. It's not always consistent. So I think that's me. So thank you for listening. That's my email address if you'd like to ask a question directly. That's a few links. So the link to the GitHub repository, and a few links for blogs written by the archivists who did the migration data. And this one is from the digital developer, so from a more technical side of things if you're interested. And that's me. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Aline. Thank you. That was really fun. Next up, we have Matthew from the Bodleian Libraries, and he's going to be sharing the implementation at their center. Over to you, Matthew. Thank you.
Hi, thanks very much. Hopefully you can all hear me and see the slides on the screen now. Thanks to Jessica and the team at ArchivesSpace for inviting me today to speak about some of the work we've been doing. So I thought today I'd give you a sense of where we've come from and what we've done and what we're currently working on for our implementation. So hopefully you can see my nice shot of the Western Library where I would normally be working, but today I'm coming to you from my living room. So just to give you a brief history about describing archives at the Bodleian, we were a very early adopter of EAD back in the late 1990s, and we published our first online catalogue in 1997. And the system that we developed for our online catalogues in the late 1990s didn't change very much, and there was very little development work from the early 2000s. The search technology was very dated, basic HTML search, Control F, very difficult to see the connections between our collections. The user experience wasn't that great, and it was really reliant on a very complex transformation process from XML to HTML to get our catalogues published. So the focus of our early efforts was very much on converting existing hard copy catalogues for online access, and EAD was seen as a very flexible technology to be able to do that. I mean, that did cause us problems later on, especially when we're looking at standardized data and integrating with other systems, which I'll come on to, which one of the great things that ArchivesSpace has brought for us is a way to solve that problem. So we were developing our catalogues in XML from the late 1990s using various software platforms such as Oxygen or XMetal at first. And in 2013, we started working with Archivist Toolkit as our back-end cataloging tool. So we had EAD in various systems, in various formats, EAD1, EAD2, and because of we've had catalogs going far back as the early 17th century, our data was very complex, and there was a real severe lack of standardization across our catalogs, which was a big challenge for us in migrating to ArchivesSpace. And just to give you an idea of our kind of raw numbers, we have about 100,000 boxes of archival manuscripts described in EAD to migrate to ArchivesSpace. So just to give you a quick view of how our online catalogues used to look until last year. So this is our online discovery platform. As I said, we were converting XML to HTML in a very lengthy process. Several style sheets were used to convert catalogues, often some hacking to create bespoke solutions for binding aids, which is not great in a world where we're looking at linked data and standardizing across several platforms. And as I say, the search technology was very dated. This page you can see a snapshot of now with basically a long list of about 2,000 catalogues, which is not the greatest user experience. And it was very much a top-down, collection-by-collection approach. So it's very difficult to see the links between our collections. And we have vast collections, and that's something we've really tried to bring out with ArchivesSpace to make those collections and connections more apparent. So it was very innovative at the time, but hadn't met the needs of our users for a very long time. And then just to drill down into how our file level descriptions look. So there's a lot of detail, a lot of rich data in there which we wanted to bring out. So ArchivesSpace enables us to do that. So this is a shot from the Oxfam archive, which is about 10,000 boxes, just to give you an idea of the extent and scale of that collection. So I mentioned that our very early efforts in EAD focused on converting existing hard copy catalogues, and a number of those, about 70 of them, had back of the book indexes. And the index tag in EAD, we might be the responsible people for that tag, which is one of my least favorite tags in EAD. So this has been a real challenge for us, making these back of the book indexes where the actual information that people are often looking for is provided an index at the back of a hard copy catalogue. Making that work in ArchivesSpace has been something we've taken a lot of interest in, and it was one of the key issues we wanted to solve in our implementation, which I will come back to later on. So as I mentioned, we have quite a big data set to work with. So we started, well, I started this back in 2016 by surveying all our EAD finding aids, which was over 3,000, try and gain a consolidated overview of their storage and location. And the master version as well, which was a real challenge. We often had multiple versions of catalogues that have been created over a 20-year period. So gaining control of that data was our first step. So the first thing we did was then to start standardizing our catalogues. And we started the standardization process before we had made a decision to go with ArchivesSpace. So we were very lucky to have funding from various bodies, including the Carnegie Corporation, the Heritage Lottery Fund, which enabled us to employ some of our trainee digital archivists and newly qualified project archivists on standardizing our data. And you can see a group of them there on the screen. So we did a lot of work, handcrafted in XML, tidying up our data, standardizing it, published some catalogues online for the first time, which we'd held in EAD for a very long time. The data conversion project in the early 2000s. So we cleaned up that data, published new catalogues for the first time, really went through our data with a microscope, cleaning it up, getting everything we need, making it fully ISAG compliant where that data was missing, such as extents or languages. That was a big job. We're also very lucky to have a software developer funded by the same grant, Andrew Morrison, who's done fantastic work on our implementation, helping us do some automation of migrating the data and standardizing it. So that was a huge help to us. At the same time, we also reworked our cataloging guidance and metadata standards to ensure that we could make the best use of what ArchivesSpace could offer us, and that's still an ongoing piece of work, which I'll come back to a bit later. So as I said, we had many gaps in ISAG compliance. The flexibility of EAD had actually become a problem for us over time, that people had pretty much done anything they wanted to do with catalogues to work with that individual collection, and that was a real big task for us to standardize that data. And I can't emphasize how much challenge standardizing metadata, and never underestimate that challenge if you're moving to ArchivesSpace or any other system. Legacy data is a very time-consuming process to work with. So just to give you a brief overview of our timeline in moving to ArchivesSpace. So we made a decision to go with ArchivesSpace in 2017, and we started installing in 2018 as we were still standardizing our data. So we've approached this really in two phases. The first phase being implementing the PUI and launching it to our researchers and readers last year. So we were aiming for an out-of-the-box implementation with some customization of the PUI. I think it's fair to say we did a bit more customization than we perhaps expected. That was mainly in making sure our data was displayed the way we wanted, given some of the quirks we have with our data. So the bulk of the migration, we actually migrated everything manually. So that was a big task for us. But we wanted to QA our data, and we've learned a lot about our data as we progress through that migration. So between February and July 2019, we migrated in 3,500 plus catalogues, which is a big task. So it's about 100,000 file level resource records, to give you an idea. We started testing our PUI internally with staff between April and July 2019 using a combination of archivists, reading room staff, testing real inquiries with the system so we could gain an understanding of how we used it, how it, some of the issues that might throw up in answering our day-to-day work. We did an internal staff launch of the PUI last August, and then we had some extensive training sessions in the library, which I led in the same month. And we also did some user testing with our researchers, which was really, really useful, and actually informed some of the training I did with staff and actually taught me a few tricks around searching, which I hadn't thought of. So that was a really useful exercise for us. And we launched our public user interface in September 29, just in time for the new university year to start. And I'm just going to show you what it looks like very briefly. So we named our service Bodleian Archives and Manuscripts. As you can see, we've made some cosmetic changes to the PUI, the colour scheme more in fitting with our other resource discovery tools. So we're currently using version 2.5.1. Upgrading is something, and future releases we're looking at and discussing now how we're going to manage that process. We implemented with one single repository for published catalogues, and we will have at least another one for in-process cataloguing as we move forward. So this is the collections screen. So in putting together our implementation, we learned several lessons from the user testing of our library catalogue solo. So things like moving the search facet to the left-hand screen, that's where our users normally expect to find them. So that was learning from our other resource discovery projects was a big help for us. Also speaking to colleagues at Harvard and Yale was very useful, showing their testing and how they got on with their implementations. So one of the additional filters we also added was a language filter. We have collections spanning several languages, so we've added that in. We also did some work on the search functionality. We've applied a boost to collection level records to make them more prominent in return search results using a BQ parameter in Solr. One of the reasons behind that was that our users have been very used to going through on a collection basis, so that collections are the thing they come to first. So we've tried to bring that functionality in as well and make sure that kind of way of discovering our material is still accessible to them. We also changed the search drop-down menu types on the home screen to full text, shelf mark, index subjects, index names, and title descriptions, just to make it clear what people were looking for. It's something that came out of our user testing, how people were searching and how they wanted to be instructed on what to search and how to do it. So just to give you a quick view of a collection level record in our implementation, you can see that we have made some tweaks to how this looks. So a lot of this was informed by user testing. So you can see at the very top the PDF icon. We've relabeled that PDF version of catalog. We have a how-to request button. We don't have a circulation system at the moment, but that button will tell you how to order material and who to contact. That was one thing that came out of our user testing, that people really wanted to be pointed towards how to order material more clearly. So we've added that in. So another thing is that Bodleian shelf marks, because they've been going for 400 years, can be quite complex and are very long strings. So we've brought in a full range of shelf marks field at collection level so people can see that information there. And the collection ID field, again, is a home generated ID from our collections management database for archives and manuscripts. We're not using ArchivesSpace for accessions. We have a homegrown system which offers a lot of functionality for us, which we want to retain. So we've brought in that ID as our unique identifier for every catalogue in ArchivesSpace. So, and then just to give you a file level shot, it's pretty similar to the normal PUI view. We've made the shelf mark more prominent, but we haven't made too many changes at this point. But the how to request button only appears at collection level and at file level or single item level in our implementation. So you can't order a series, for example. So I mentioned the back of the book index problem we had earlier. So to bring these in and make them more functional, our developer Andrew Morrison came up with a great solution using XSL to convert the nested elements to paragraphs, lists, and items, which meant that we could then make the index entries linked into the actual catalogue record. So this has been a huge improvement for us, that people can go to the collection level record and actually click on the item they want to see and take you right to the file level record. This isn't a long-term solution. Ideally, we want to move this data into the file level records, but this has been a big step forward for us into our implementation, and it's been a great boost for us. Just to briefly tell you about what we're doing now. So I'm currently working on developing cataloguing guidance and local standards for staff user interface to move active cataloguing into ArchivesSpace. We want to leave Archivist Toolkit as soon as possible. At the moment, we're currently having to export a catalogue from Archivist Toolkit and then move it into ArchivesSpace. Excuse me. Manually. And before the lockdown, we were hoping to have been in a position where we could start doing that training now, but that's delayed that and the implementation of the cataloguing guidance. So that's something I'm actually working on now. We're taking opportunity to look at how we've used names and subject authority records in ArchivesSpace. I'm developing new guidance on how we want people to use subjects and having some mandatory subject terms. One of the things we've already done is introduce the century of creation for collections as a mandatory LCSH subject term, so users can profile 20th century, 19th century collections. We're doing lots and lots of work around retrospective conversion of summary catalogue, the main finding age for our collection of 1602 to 1976. We are in the process of converting that now. That's going to add about 50,000 boxes of new material to our online discovery and ArchivesSpace. We're also just started to move towards putting the archive of the university catalogue into ArchivesSpace, another 16,000 boxes. So we have more than 2,000 catalogues in the pipeline to go into ArchivesSpace, and because of the lockdown, we're doing other conversion of catalogues, which will produce another big batch to go in as well. So we're moving a lot of data in all of the time. We're currently engaged in barcoding all of our archives and manuscripts held in the Western Library, which is the image you can see on screen. So we're barcoding about 120,000 boxes of material at the moment. Well, we were until the lockdown. We will resume that when we can go back into the building. That project has been a key for us. The key strategic goal is to bring in an online circulation system for archives and manuscripts, and that work has just started. We're really interested in having persistent URLs for our catalogues and ArchivesSpace, and we're actively investigating using ARCs to do that now. And I'm currently working on how we're going to use digital objects in ArchivesSpace and how the metadata we're going to work with is going to be implemented. So that's those are just to give you a flavour of what we're working on now. And if you'd like to contact me, this is my email and our website, and you can see our user interface, archives.bodleian.ac.uk. So thank you very much for listening.
Thank you so much, Matthew. That was great. Those customizations in particular were quite sort of contextualized. It was quite nice to see. Great. I think we can open this out to the audience here. If people have questions, they could go ahead and unmute themselves and ask, or put it into the chat window. And I can sort of relay the question to the rest of the group. So over to all of us. While people think, I'm just going to take the opportunity to maybe just ask one myself. Just going back to Natalie's presentation where you talked about the UK archival thesaurus. And maybe this is a question more towards Jessica or anyone else from ArchivesSpace. I was curious to know if something like that could be integrated into ArchivesSpace in addition to something like an LCNAF or an LCSH. Would that be something that might be possible, like going into the future?
Venkat, shall I just say a little bit about how we worked on the UK archival thesaurus? Maybe I'm not sure whether Jessica's here or not.
Sure, go ahead. That'd be great. Yeah.
Okay, so I mean, actually, it was only one of the two controlled value, thesauri that we looked at. The other one was the Getty Thesaurus of Geographic Names. So we really wanted to include that in ArchivesSpace because we have a lot of collections that cover a wide geographical spread, and unfortunately we found that the Getty Geographic Names was just far too big for ArchivesSpace, and it was very hard with the ArchivesSpace interface for a cataloger or a staff user to be able to be confident that they'd got the right terms. So if you look up a place like China on the Getty thesaurus, you'll see that there are actually an awful lot of different places that are called China, and we just felt there was too much room for tagging things with the wrong term with the Getty thesaurus. But the UK archival thesaurus is much smaller, and it was much more manageable for us, and it works really nicely on the data entry side because you can search the subjects, and then you kind of discover that actually there are probably more specific terms than you realised, which you can then use to index the metadata. So it is working really well, and as we're migrating our legacy data in, we're matching subject index terms from the legacy data with the UK archival thesaurus and making sure that they're linked properly. So we're improving the quality of our data that way.
Great, thank you. Thanks so much. And Christine also sort of chimed in to say that if there is interest, some sort of an integration could be considered into the future. There is a question for Aline from Saskia, and I'll just read it out. She says, I really like the integration with IIIF, and it's something that they would also really like to set up. So if Aline, could you just sort of share your thoughts on this?
Yes. Hi. Yeah, thanks. So as I said in the chat, so it's still in prototype stage, but I'm sure so Scott Renton and his team would be happy to share his work. So for now, we only have like a few blogs up and some slides online, and I know he presented something to the IIIF consortium last year in Edinburgh. So if I don't have them just now, but if you want to send me an email, maybe I can share with you the work he's done and tell him you're interested.
That'd be great. Yeah, actually, I think I would imagine a lot of people would be interested in that IIIF sort of integration that you guys did. Saskia also had another question from Matthew, and I quote, which circulation system is Matthew's group considering for their university? So Matthew, if you could take that one up.
Yeah, so we're very early into that project. So we hope to share some news in the forthcoming months, but we've literally only the project might only just started. So at the moment, I can't really discuss what we're looking at, but we hope to share that information with people very soon.
Great, thank you.
I have sort of a more general question for all three of you. All three of you sort of touched on the fact that your working conditions have changed recently, very dramatically. So I was just curious how your work in ArchivesSpace has changed, or maybe even who is working in ArchivesSpace, the sort of projects that you're doing now in this work from home environment that are different from what you were doing before.
Oops, sorry.
Okay, so I mean, ours are mainly around retro conversion. So before the lockdown, people literally took copies of typewritten catalogues. So there's a lot of people entering the data into ArchivesSpace, but because we're it's so new for us that we've gone live with ArchivesSpace. It's been a really brilliant opportunity for them to actually get more familiar with the system, working from home. So that's been really good. And then with the data that has been migrated to ArchivesSpace, the database owners there are checking the migrations and doing a bit of improvement now that they can see how they look in ArchivesSpace. So it has been a good opportunity for us, actually.
Yeah, and for us, well, it's a bit the same. We're doing a lot of retroconversion work, so our user services team, they can't obviously do their usual tasks. So I identified some hand lists, all the hand lists that can easily be retroconverted into ArchivesSpace, and then I'm just creating very, very detailed instructions for them. So they're a bit familiar with ArchivesSpace because they know, or they know how to search it to find location and collection, but they don't really know how to create content. So I think it was a really good opportunity for them to actually get a bit more familiar with that. And it's good for us as well. It allows us to get more resources in a proper format. And I've also been creating a manual for authorities. So all this kind of work. So it's really convenient really to have archive, to be able to archive space from home.
Yep, so the web access has been really, really helpful. It's really useful. And actually, in terms of using ArchivesSpace, my kind of work hasn't changed that much because I can do so much of it online. If anything, I've had more time to focus on our implementation. So whether that be migrating data in, I think I've migrated about 500 catalogues or single items in for others to work on and finish off. We're also doing loads of work around data conversion. I mentioned our big projects on our summary catalogue and the university's archive. That work has, some ways, been brought forward due to the lockdown, and the summary catalogue work has continued as we would if we were in the office. Obviously, we can't check some of the things in the material, which is a bit frustrating, but it's given me more time to work on ArchivesSpace. We've started other conversion projects on our legacy planning aids, which we might not have had a chance to do. So that work will appear in ArchivesSpace at some point. So I'm working on guidelines for archivist cataloging in ArchivesSpace, looking at our subject indexing. So from that point of view, I've got to do pretty much everything I can do in the office with ArchivesSpace at home, although I hugely miss my double screen monitors at work while I'm at home. So it has really enabled us to carry on with our work, and I've had more time to invest in ArchivesSpace that I probably wouldn't have had if I was working in the office with other responsibilities. So it has been really, really useful being able to access it from home via the web.
Thanks, Matthew. Anybody else with any burning questions? We have maybe a minute left for the session to end. But if not, oh, there is one. Andrew, if it's possible for you, you could also just unmute and.
Hello?
Yeah, go ahead.
Hi, I'm Andrew Morrison. I just wanted to mention that some of the things that Matthew mentioned in his presentation, like the language filter and a few other tweaks and bug fixes, we've contributed those back to the core ArchivesSpace, and they'll likely be included in the next release when that comes out, but not the back of the book indexes, because the solution is quite specialized to our particular data, and I understand that in general indexes are quite a niche thing anyway. So
that's great. Thank you. Imagine a larger community would be very appreciative of that. That's great. I noticed a couple of people in the chat window had mentioned that they'll get in touch with each other. Does everyone have everyone else's email addresses? Christine, Jessica, do you know if that's the case, or do people plug in their email IDs in this window?
If anyone is interested in sharing their email directly, they're more than welcome to do that right now. Otherwise, of course, these sessions were recorded, and I will be asking all of the presenters for their slides and contact information to accompany the recording. So if anyone's presentation particularly resonated with you, or you want to follow up with anything, you'll be able to find their contact information that way. And I know that they all did provide resources at the end, final slides to blogs and other things like that. So those will be provided on the forum wiki. But if anyone wants to follow up, they could privately chat whoever they'd like to reach out with, or you know, give us all your email address. Please feel free. And of course, if you are from an ArchivesSpace member institution, if you'd like to keep the conversation going, you can do so on the users group listserv. If you are not part of an ArchivesSpace member institution, or even if you are, there is an ArchivesSpace Google group where anyone is welcome to pose questions. So we can also keep a conversation going there. And I think with that, we are past time. So I will go ahead and thank all of you for attending. This was a really great session. I enjoyed all three of these presentations so much. They were all very cool. And I hope to see you all again at either another session at the ArchivesSpace Forum or another ArchivesSpace event soon. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Jessica. Have a good night.